Hello, people of the world. I've seen a lot of Vtubers do lore videos to explain their character's general premise, and I wanted to try it out for myself. So this series, and yes, it is a series, will be the introduction to my character. There will be art, time lapses, or otherwise that will accompany these videos, but they are primarily auditory, so feel free to treat it like a podcast. All right, without further delay, here is the first chapter of Dragon West. Oh, and I'm Octoreges, by the way. I looked down at the wharf from my vantage point on top of the cliff face. They have more patrols tonight, I told my partner, offering him the binoculars so he could see. The night wind was cold and slightly damp from the ocean, and the waves crashed heavily against the base of the cliff. Just like we expected, Jaden replied with a grin. The info I got from the Signet was right after all. The Signet was an underground group that Jaden was a member of, though I didn't know much about them. He had been able to gather intel for the base through their channels as a favor to me. In exchange, I had been required to help Jaden with some other work for them over the past 3 months. The fact that I hadn't been able to discover anything about them in that time was both frustrating and a testament to their security. So are we ready to go then? I asked, somewhat impatiently. The irony of me asking the question, considering how rash Jaden usually acted, was not lost on me. He gave me a knowing look and said, I've been ready since we first got here. This is the important part of the plan, though, and it really was crucial that we wait until they receive the shipment. You remember the time crunch we're under here, right? Of course I remember, I replied, though as truthful as that statement was, it wasn't until now that I really understood just how narrow a window we actually had. The base was surrounded by high concrete walls topped with razor wire, and around every 60 meters or so there were watchtowers equipped with spotlights. Snipers equipped with the military's basic rifles sat in the towers, but they were the least problematic part of the base's security. Along the top of the wall there were anti-personnel sensors that would trigger the alarm if anyone outside the military entered the base. Of course, we had figured all of that out already. Once the shipment arrives, they have to deactivate the sensors for 3 minutes while they transfer it between the sea and land crews. We'll fly in above the towers and then drop in through the factory's smokestack. I related the rough plan to Jaden. He nodded. Right, that's your part. I'll sit outside and wait for your signal, which you'll give me once you secure the sphere core. Then I'll drop in and actually get to the fun piece of the night. And if something goes wrong? I asked. We fail, go to prison, the military keeps the sphere core, you don't get to leave the city, I'll be sentenced to 15 years, and you'll be in for 20. We'll slowly lose contact. I'll meet a guy named Rufus who will seem like a good person, but then I'll have to kill him when he betrays me. My sentence will be extended indefinitely until I eventually receive the death penalty, and most importantly, I'll have to eat a jelly donut as my last meal before I cark it. And I hate jelly donuts. Jaden replied with full nonchalance. I rolled my eyes. Oh, GA. Honestly, where do you come up with all that? No worries, mate, Jaden said. You've been on 14 missions with me before this one, and all that time, did any of them ever actually turn out right? I thought about the question. Well, no, I said hesitantly. They all kind of went south. Exactly, Jaden said, cutting me off. We can spend all the time in the world making the best and most detailed plan ever, but at the end of the day, it's action that counts. Something's gonna go wrong, and when it does, we'll fight our way out. Seriously, it's just a military base full of like 100, 1,000? A bunch of guys with guns that are authorized to kill on sight. We are gonna be fine. I stared at my friend, whose boisterous attitude, while very encouraging, was far from something anyone else would or should listen to. Even now, in a serious situation like this, he was as immature as ever. Of course, then again, I was the one who was being impatient. I could hardly contain myself, since I was so close to finally setting out. Jaden drew in a sharp breath. They just arrived. I took the binoculars back and peered once again at the wharf. Soldiers on deck of the ship began securing lines and dropping a gangway so they could disembark. Come on already, Jaden shouted at me. He had to run to the spot where we had positioned the glider for liftoff, several feet from the cliff's edge. I returned the binoculars to my pack and hurried over to him. 5 seconds to strap in, and another 3 to sprint to the edge and jump. The canvas on the glider went taut as it fell through the air. I felt my stomach lurch from the initial fall. But that feeling turned to excitement as we sailed out above the ocean. Jaden leaned the glider to the right, and we gradually turned back inland towards the base. The smokestack released heavy smog into the air, marking our destination with an off-white haze against the dark sky. "Go ahead and get ready to drop," Jaden called to me over the wind. "I'll do a flyover before I land, but we only have enough height for one go. I can't chuck a Yui." "Right," I called back as I moved to grab the ventilation mask and goggles we had tied to the glider's frame earlier. My vision was painted in orange tones as I tied the goggles to my face. "Okay," Jaden shouted. The glider started to accelerate as he aimed down toward the top of the chimney. "Please keep your arms and legs flailing as you exit the flight. This has been your captain speaking, and we thank you for riding Air Jaden," he continued. I watched the approaching smokestack so I could time my jump right. Jaden leveled out the glider, then hot smoke wrapped around us. I quickly triggered the release from my harness, and then I fell. Even with my goggles, I could barely see anything through the smoke, and the air through my mask was warm and sticky. I counted to 10 in my head, then pulled the drawstring on my pack. A parachute unfurled above me and slowed my descent. Unfortunately, there wasn't any time to leisurely float to the bottom, and for that matter, I wouldn't even be going that far. The smoke was thick, but now that I wasn't in free fall, I could better make out my surroundings. The walls of the chimney swept out in every direction, cylindrical as it was, and below me, about 4 meters, there was a thin railing. I directed my chute toward the railing until I was directly above it, and then once I was close enough, I pulled the release cord and dropped onto the railing. The metal was warm, and I could feel the heat rising up from the soles of my boots. I followed the walkway to the edge of the chimney and found my exit. A reinforced metal door. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. One of the ones that I had prepared beforehand. The iron door in front of me was of course locked, and it was also the type of door one might find inside a bulkhead warship, or in layman's terms, it wasn't something that would normally be so easy to unlock. Of course, that thought held 2 fallacies in its logic. Carefully, I pressed the paper up against the door, and after a moment, there was an audible click, and the door's wheel began to turn on its own. The first fallacy was in the assumption that there was an easy way to open the door at all. And the second was the assumption that I was normal. The door creaked open and I stepped out, much to my relief, into the cold night air once more. After I exited, the door swung closed on its own, to which I removed my respirator and said, "Thanks, that was a tight pinch." The only reply I received was the door's heavy lock clicking back into place, but I was sure it was happy to have obliged me. I turned my attention back towards my mission. To my left, I had a fairly clear view of the wharf, and I could see the convoy ship that had pulled into the factory's shipyard. I couldn't make out the weapons from this distance, but the metallic hull and the emblem painted on the canvas making up the rear sail of the vessel displayed well enough who it belonged to. A symbol of the Dracon army. Just the sight of their flag turned my stomach, but I didn't have time to dwell on my disdain for the military now. "Looks like they finished the trade," I said. "Are the perimeter sensors back up?" "Yep, restoring as we speak, defo," came Jaden's curt reply through my earpiece. "I'm assuming you're on the outer railing now?" "Right, heading across to the main building's door," I said as I started moving again. The door opposite the smokestack was much easier to access, since its security was only a minimal and very pickable lock. Upon the other side of the door, I met an enclosed stairwell that led down to the factory's other floors. I made my way down, and exited through another door into a long hallway. From my memory of the factory's layout, of which I had studied extensively prior to tonight, I knew that if I continued to the end of the hall, I would find the main plant floor for the building. This factory specialized in weapons manufacturing for the Dracon army, and that was precisely why I needed to visit it. I'm at the bottom of the stairs, I told Jaden. "How's security looking?" "Starting to clear up from the exchange, but still busy. For now it's clear. We still have about 5 minutes before the sensors start sweeping the base for intruders." "Since when do they do that?" I nearly shouted as I sprinted for the other end of the hall. "Since always," Jaden replied. "Of course, I can make my entrance as soon as the alarm sounds, which should buy you some extra time. All you have to do is grab an info core from the assembly lines, a minute and a half job at most." "Easy for you to say," I did shout this time. The doors to the plant floor slammed open, and my face met a wall of warm air. Metal clanged and gears whirred overhead. Everything inside the plant was fully automated, with only a few ferry to oversee the work, but I doubted any of the enslaved creatures would fuss over my presence. The room was essentially a warehouse with various generators and machines spaced throughout, while the rest of the space was filled with shelves housing parts and weapons waiting to be shipped. I perused the shelves for a while, though the labels were somewhat difficult to read. Eventually, though, I managed to find a box that was labeled Info Storage Cores. These cores contain the operation codes and other initiatives required to operate most of the Army's weaponized machinery. All right, I radioed to Jaden. I secured the package. Sweet, he replied, and I could almost imagine his mischievous grin. How should my entrance look? I slipped the core into my pack. The more obnoxious, the better, right? That really is my style, Jaden agreed. So, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the first chapter of Dragon West. It's a series that I'm very excited to continue into the future. I'm going to have maybe some more art content or something else up on the channel soon. I haven't really decided yet. So, something coming soon. If you had a good time, then definitely subscribe so you don't miss any new chapters. And until I see you again, hooroo, mates.